Well, hello everybody. It's Jeremy, the existential wine guy, saying with our first Facebook and Instagram live of 2019. I want to. Last year was so amazing for this broadcast and just being able to throw out questions and get feedback, and just to wax philosophically on any social media platform is always kind of fun for me. Anyway, so I'm starting out this year with this is a milestone for me. First 1,000 followers on my Instagram account. I know that doesn't seem like a lot to other people, but for me personally, it's all been organic. These are people who've just chosen to follow me. I haven't done any sort of crazy process of like trying to buy followers or set anything up like that. So the fact that I've got 1,000 people, that are mildly interested in what I'm doing here is just kind of absolutely amazing. So thank you to everyone else, everybody who's following me. I had a fantastic New Year's, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in today's broadcast. I call it a broadcast show. I'm not even sure the terminology that I want to use, but had an absolutely sort of fantastic Christmas holiday, as well as goofing off in Carmel and visiting a bunch of tasting rooms there, and we're going to be sort of, talking a little bit about that as well. We're going to sort of give some closure to some questions that had come up in previous broadcasts. So let's go ahead and get started. If you're not, you haven't seen any of my broadcasts before, my name is Jeremy Marin. I go by the Existential Wine Guy. I want to explore the idea of being alive through wine, and get to talk to you about it, and hopefully answer any questions that come up with you as well. I come at you every Wine Wednesday at about 5:30 p.m. We talk for about 20 minutes or so, and then I kind of let you get on and do dinner and do all the other things that you might want to do. So my personal experience is I've been in the wine industry. I'm a wine industry veteran, working for and in wineries for the last 8 to 10 years or so, doing everything from consulting, specifically customer experience, anything from front of house to managing social media as well. So I kind of have my fingers in a lot of different pots, and more than anything else, I just really enjoy talking about wine. So this is a great venue for that. While I was down in Carmel over the weekend, I got to meet up with another buddy of mine, Rick, who's also in the industry. And while we had some free time, we decided to go ahead and hit a couple of tasting rooms, wine tasting rooms, of course, in the sort of Carmel, the village of Carmel. And what a lot of people may not know is that Carmel has an absolutely fantastic little wine road with about 10 to 15 different tasting rooms. And we've both experienced and explored a bunch of the tasting rooms in the Carmel area. And this time when we went out, we kind of made it a rule, hey, let's try some places that we've never tried before. So we ended up hitting 3 different wineries, very different in style and approach, but all of them had one thing in common, and we're going to get to that in a second. But the first one that we actually visited was Di Tierra. It's one that we passed by a couple of times, but unbeknownst to us, it actually had some fairly new owners. The owners are new by about a couple of years or so, so they've just sort of taken over, and their wines are starting to sort of represent the idea of the new owners. And it was absolutely fantastic. It was, we tasted everything from lots of Pinot Noirs in that area, lots of Chardonnay. What was interesting is there were some Rhone varietals too in there. So just overall, but we had a great experience, and more than anything else, one thing that we've talked about in previous shows is this idea of like what makes a good tasting room, what kind of ensures a good experience for you. What are the things that you look for or expect, and then actually what actually happens when you go there. So in the past, I've always asked anybody who has a tasting room or a winery that they specifically love, I would love to hear from you, and I'd love to know why. So feel free to throw it in the comments, and maybe we'll address it here or address it later. But anyway, so we walked into the first tasting room, and what was interesting was the tasting room manager, it was like her second day. So it was interesting that while she had known the winery for a while and certainly were friends with the owners, this was her first opportunity to really, dive in as a tasting room manager. And of course, me and my buddy Rick, we're not going to let that go unpunished, of course. So we started peppering her with all sorts of kind of questions. And one thing that really impressed me more than anything else was not that she knew a lot, but she also knew when she didn't know a lot. And she didn't necessarily presume to know things or give the impression that she knew things that she didn't. And I always I always appreciate that. I think that there's this, this level up sense of entitlement, snobbery that often comes along with our industry, and unfortunately it can be a little detrimental, especially if the person behind the counter is trying to make the person in front of the counter feel a little awkward or feel that they know something they don't. Wine is a communal experience, and the snobbery that seems to get attached with it really shouldn't be there. And I do my best when I do train staff to go ahead and make sure that they don't do that. It's okay to look things up. It's okay to say that I don't know about it. And it actually can build a quicker relationship between the person in front of the counter and the person tasting than if they're just like slightly dismissing them for not knowing, what they're tasting, or or what the wines are about, or the winery itself. So it was a really kind of a fun experience, and she was completely open to, after we had done the tasting, any suggestions, or like when we kind of ripped apart her tasting notes, and we feel bad about that. Not bad enough not to do it, of course, but it was kind of funny. It was like, hey, this, we were reading it and just kind of looking at kind of crazy things, and little bits of improvement here or there. But she was, she rolled with the punches. She was totally fine with it. It was absolutely fantastic. And then we moved on to the next winery, which had kind of a different approach to it. I'm not going to actually mention this winery, and the reason why is I have no interest in critiquing a winery or bashing a winery. I want everything that I do to be a little bit more on the positive side. And if you hear me talk about a wine or winery, it's because I like it, not because somebody told me I was supposed to like it or anything like that. So what was kind of fun, although I didn't necessarily appreciate their wines as much as maybe they did, and certainly they were looking at a Carmel audience. The wines were incredibly overpriced, unfortunately, and just their whole approach to it was very much a Carmel sort of experience. But what was also nice about the woman who was behind the counter, she was a little bit on the younger side. She had worked there for about 8 months or so. And again, it was in the enthusiasm that she had that kind of made the experience a much more engaging and enjoyable. I would definitely actually go back there just to try their wines again to see if there's any difference down the road. Very often wines will change, wineries will change, depending on the owners, depending on the winemakers, depending on what grapes they're getting this year, all of that type of stuff. So it was an odd experience. Ultimately, kind of fun, but not my favorite winery. So now we're going to move on. But before we do, we had some people join us, so I want to thank them for joining me for the first Facebook and Instagram Live of 2019. Kitty Gaga, thank you so much. Donnie Rue, always good to see you. I think I saw Laura there as well, and Paul Anderson, thank you so much for joining me. On Facebook, we have, Laura, that's where I saw you there. Charlene, thank you so much. We also, Jan and Marlise, so thank you for joining. And of course, my buddy Russ is there. If you haven't checked him out, Kilton Cork, that's definitely, his broadcast is tomorrow, and you should definitely check it out. He does it almost every Thursday right around 5:30 as well. If you're just joining me, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy, and I'm kind of going through my New Year's Eve experience of tasting wineries in the Carmel Valley, and specifically in the village of Carmel, where they have a bunch of tasting rooms. So if you ever are in Carmel and you get tired of the beach and the shops and all the kind of wonderful things that happen in Carmel, definitely you need to go and start going to their tasting rooms. These guys are producing absolutely phenomenal wines. A lot of it, of course, is Central Coast. A lot of it's going to be wines from that particular region, and those are always fun to check out. So that is bringing us to our third and final tasting room that we experienced, and that was our buddies over at Windy Oaks. And I actually have a couple bottles because I bought a couple bottles there. Windy Oaks is mostly known for their Pinot Noirs and their Chardonnays. In fact, they actually have vines from the DRC, Domaine Romanée-Conti, that actually from those vineyards in France. And if you're not familiar with Domaine Romanée-Conti, it is absolutely probably the most famous vineyard on the face of the planet. It has been declared a national institute by, actually, I think the United Nations. And if you don't know anything about them and would like to learn a little bit more about the history and some of the funny, goofy stuff that's gone on there, there is a great book called Shadows in the Vineyard that talks about the dumbest blackmail scheme on the face of the planet, but along it parallels the whole history of that particular vineyard. And what's interesting is when a crime was being committed against that particular vineyard, the response by the French police and the French government in general took this thing incredibly seriously, and basically caught the guy in a couple weeks. And just a testament to how wine is part of the national identity in France. I don't know of any other country, maybe except Italy, that kind of falls into the same category as them. Anyway, so getting back to Windy Oaks, their Pinot Noirs were absolutely gorgeous, and for, I think, well, I'll talk about the service in a second, but we just kept getting served new and more interesting, dare I say better, Pinot Noir from bottle to bottle to bottle. They were absolutely extraordinary. What is interesting in wineries like this that have a singular focus on those type of varietals, when they produce other varietals, they sort of keep the same theme, that they attack their whatever that happens to be, whatever varietal it happens to be. And so the wines that I took home were actually really different. And the first one I took home was a Grenache from the Santa Lucia Highlands. This Grenache is just beautiful. It was lovely. Very much unlike the Grenaches you might get in Northern California, especially the Sierra foothills. This is beautiful. It's light. It's easygoing. It would be maybe the first red you'd open up in the day. You could continue to drink it all night, or it's a great wine to start with, and then move on to something a little bit bigger and bolder, like a Cabernet with a meal or anything like that. The next one, and this was the real surprise for me, was this 2015 Old Vine Mourvedre. Now, typically Mourvedre is a bit healthier. It's a bigger wine, especially up here where you get a lot of the Rhone varietals. You get a lot of GSMs, Grenache, Mourvedre, Syrahs, and they can be big and bold. This particular Mourvedre was absolutely light. It was the lightest thing I had ever had. It had the effect that you can only get with older vines that produce typically less fruit, but more interesting fruit. Excuse me one sec. Isn't that great? I know, you were expecting me to be drinking a red. I'm actually gonna be making a roasted chicken with lemon and onion tonight, and decided to go white, so salud. But back to the Mourvedre. This is a Mourvedre that I hadn't experienced anything like this in a Mourvedre anywhere else. So I had to pick up a bottle. Again, super light for a Mourvedre, with just almost like an ethereal moment on the palate as you're tasting this. It was quite unique, nothing like I'd tasted before for any other Mourvedre. So I just think it's interesting that, you know, sometimes what can be produced, the ancillary wines that are the ones that are not necessarily as much of a focus, it was clear that how they were making these wines was just as much of a focus, just as much of a just as much on theme as, and the same sort of energy that they were producing their Pinot Noirs and their Chardonnays. Sorry, a little something in my throat there. Let's take a look here. Getting more people on the broadcast. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate seeing and hearing from you. So, I wanted to get back to what we were talking about a couple episodes ago. What do we expect? What do we want from a tasting room? What is a good tasting room? What is that type of experience? And what I wanted to talk about when we were visiting all these tasting rooms in Carmel was the one theme that they seemed to have in common was the enthusiasm of the person behind the counter. In our particular experience of these three wineries, both Rick and I, as we're bebopping along, is that all the people were fairly new. And they were all super enthusiastic, and they just wanted to talk about wine. And so many people say, well, how do you get good customer service in a winery? And I'll say this for a winery or for any place. To get good customer service, you have to be a good customer. You have to be the guy who is not an asshole. You have to be the person who doesn't have a sense of entitlement that says you've got to serve me first or you're spending too much time with other people. You simply have to go in and enjoy the experience and roll with the punches. Sometimes these guys are a little bit busy. And if you're the guy who's willing to wait it out, it's amazing what you will get in return, what that reward that is absolutely going to be. It's something that I talk about when I'm coaching people, when I'm coaching staff. It's something that I talk about just even being my friends. Be the good guy and good things will come to you. I know it sounds sort of cheeky to say that, but it's absolutely true. And in this case, with our over at Windy Oaks, we met up with Greg. Greg was the guy behind the counter. We're there just goofing. At first we weren't talking too much, but eventually we started, asking the questions and asking the questions that, that he was interested about, talking about wine in such a way with not necessarily an elevated vocabulary that seems to lose people or make people fall asleep, but talk about wine in real terms. As we did, extraordinary things happen. And I hope that this doesn't get Greg busted, because he started, as he could tell that we were people that really appreciated wine and really wanted to experience different things, he started pulling out reserves, things that he absolutely should not have opened because it's way too expensive just to open up, this single bottle for this one customer in this one winery, or this one tasting room, I should say. But he did. And of course, once you are on the, if you're that guy, if you're the guy behind the counter, you're starting to offer up these little special samples and these special tastings, seriously, you're going to get a friend for life. And those are going to translate into sales for you and your winery. So I can remember working for a not so great winery in my past, and there were rules about what we could open up and what we didn't open up, and I ignored all of them. I figured, what the hell, I'm just going to have a good time. And I got, I never really got busted for it, but what I did find is it would help me with sales. It would help me elevate the experience that people wanted to buy from me. And again, it's something that I counsel all the wineries that I've worked with is, people buy wine, people join wine clubs for the wine, yes, but actually for the experience. And it's generally that person who's behind the counter that's just that much more engaging. The person who's going to offer you just that little bit, a little extra taste. The person that makes you feel just a little bit more special. Those are the guys who will reap in all the wine clubs. Those are the guys who are always going to get the commissions. Those are the people who will make long-lasting friendships, and they'll do it very, very quickly with people who are coming into the bar. Greg did an incredible job for us, and it wasn't just that he was letting us taste all these wines that, like, literally the tasting was fairly full, but like we're getting this oddly special treatment, and it worked out well for him, don't get me wrong. But he was pulling out all these things, but he was doing it because, not for necessarily to try to get that sale. He did it because of his enthusiasm behind it, because he wanted to see our reaction. He found a couple guys behind the bar who maybe have a little bit more experience in tasting and appreciate wine maybe on another level that not all of their customers do. And he just kept giving us more samples. And as we were tasting it, and it did help that this wine was absolutely fantastic. I mean, we probably got poured, 8 different Pinot Noirs alone. And each one of them was unique. Each one of them was different. Each one of them just had, absolutely phenomenal aromas. Some even gave off like crazy bits of spice. I was literally tasting Pinots that I was tasting flavors in Pinots that I hadn't tasted in any other Pinot before. It was absolutely fantastic. And we were excited about it. And as he's giving us some wines, he's getting excited. And all of a sudden, there's like other people in the room staring at, you know, at our little group going, what the hell's going on over there? How come I'm not having that experience? You know, I think eventually Greg did open it up for some of the other people in the tasting room as well. But it was really interesting to have that experience. And, you know, if I was joining a wine club, that was absolutely the one that I would be that I would have joined. They had absolutely phenomenal wines. They actually had multiple tasting rooms too. There was one in Carmel, one at the winery, and I think one in Monterey, someplace else. I didn't check that. I probably should have. Anyway, at the end of the day, when we talk about the experience of walking into a tasting room, this is what I'm looking for. It was asked to me a while back, and I didn't get really a chance to fully answer it. Like, you know, what have been my most favorite tasting room experiences? And you know, right now I have to put my experience at Windy Oaks right at the top. It was really, or at least in the top 5. It was wonderful across the board because there's nothing like more exciting than geeking out on, you know, it could be wine, it could be anything, but you're geeking out with other people. And even though you started off as strangers, your mutual appreciation for, you know, whatever you happen to be geeking out on, it fills your heart with, you know, joy and love. And, you know, I guess that's what I look for when I'm going tasting. I'm looking for fantastic wine and for, you know, like-minded people who are super enthusiastic about what they're doing and what you're doing. Anyway, oh, wow, look at me, geeking out again. I'm kind of over my self-appointed time limit. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I want to hear the things that you get excited about. I want to know about the wineries you're excited about, because I'd like to go check them out as well. And if there's any subjects, topics, you know, wines you would like to talk about or hear me talk about, and maybe go ahead and you know, explore a particular varietal more, please. Not everybody who watches my show actually gets to watch it at this time. I know it's kind of a weird time for a lot of people who are coming home from work and they don't quite make it, but after the fact, would love to hear from you in the comments, either on Instagram, on Facebook, and I know I've been teasing you with my YouTube channel. It's coming probably in the next week or two. I know I've said that before, but you know, it's the new year, so it's time for new resolutions and achieving new things. Lastly, oh, Michael, hey, good to see you on Facebook, telling me about the statement that the favorite wineries are where the person pouring is more as engaging. Yes, Michael, look, I couldn't agree with you more. It's what I look for, that nobody, you know, when you're in a winery and you're not engaged and people aren't trying to share their love of wine for you, maybe it's time to take a hike. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. You wasted another beautiful 20 minutes watching this video, but I'm so glad you did. Next week, I'll be coming at you again live at Wine Wednesday at 5:30 from the kitchen of Chez Maron. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Cheers.